Reading with your kids.
Hola, niha, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni moni wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful and historic neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so honored and so wicked happy that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show, and please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, wherever you find your podcast. We want to invite all the authors and aspiring authors who are listening to the podcast to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Please be sure to click on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page to discover how we can help you celebrate your book with the entire world. Now, you know, if you are an author, especially an independent or self-published author, you probably had no idea that when you were writing your book and getting it published, you had no idea that once that book was published, that you became the CEO of a small business, your book business. Yeah, it is. It's a business now. And you had no idea that there are literally thousands of books published every single... You thought I was going to say year. No. There are thousands of books published every single month. It is so hard for a book to stand out in that crowd, especially an independent or sub-published book. But we would love to help you do that. If you visit readingwithyourkids.com and click on that Authors Click Here button, you will discover how you can be a guest here on the podcast. Being a guest gives you the chance to tell the world all about your book. It's fun, it's easy, and it doesn't cost you a thing. You can also learn about our Certified Great Read program. This is a program that has helped so many authors. You can also discover our monthly promotion program. We're really excited. We've helped so many authors to date, and we would love to help you. Please go to readingwithyourkids.com, click on that Authors Click Here button at the top of the page, and discover how we can help you celebrate your book with the world. Join us right now from the beautiful witch city of Salem in the state of Massachusetts. We are joined today by the author of Junior Miles and the Junk Man, a great middle grade novel from our guest, Kevin Carey. Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Good. How are you, Jed?
I am doing very well, thank you. Excited to have you on the show. Excited to have you coming to us from my daughter's new hometown. She's been up there for about a year. You survived October. It's tough in Salem in October.
Yeah, it slows down a little bit getting around. You know, there's a fair amount of traffic going on, but you know, people make a year's salary in a couple of months, so it's good for them.
It really is. It's really crazy, the amount of people that, I was going to use the word invade. Perhaps that's not kind, but it's, you know, they come up and they're celebrating all things Halloween, and it's all because a bunch of women were murdered, wrongly accused of being a witch.
No, it seems like an odd celebration at times, for sure.
It really does. It really does. So tell us about Junior Miles and the Junk Man.
Well, Junior's 13 years old. His family lives on the grounds of a junkyard that his father owns. And his father is a junk sculptor. And he dies at the beginning of the novel. And he leaves Junior this life-size junk figure. I use the word junk as a term of endearment. I know some people think I'm disparaging the salvage business, but it's and so they leave him this life-size figure made of recycled material and junk, and it comes alive, and it sends him on a series of journeys, all designed to overcome the grief of losing his father.
You know, I love that premise. Mainly because there's the only time that I've ever won anything for visual arts or even was recognized for anything visual that I created was in 8th grade, and we were challenged to create a piece of junk art out of all of the leftover wood in our shop class. Shop class, for those of you, that's like where you learn woodworking and everything. I know they don't have shop class anymore most places. But me and my buddy created this thing, and to be honest with you, it was a little bit risque, and we kind of did it, thinking, well, maybe we'll get in trouble for this, and that will make our day. But we won the award for the best piece of junk art.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, the book came to be because years ago I had taken my children to an exhibit called Springs, Sprockets, and Pulleys by an artist from Newburgh, New York named Steve Gerberich. And it was a series of figures, life-size, all made of recycled material. And they all were connected on these pulleys. So you might see a little band, you press a button, and all three of them would move at the same time. And then there was one figure over in the corner named George who had a fishing pole and a teapot for a head. And I started looking at that, and a story started to come to mind. And then nothing happened. 2 years later, the exhibit, I was in New Jersey, and the exhibit was down the street again. And I went, and then I started to conjure up a story that took me quite a few years to get off the ground. But so I've since gone to meet with Steve at his studio in New York, and it was fantastic just to meet him and thank him for being the inspiration for this story that found its legs after a few years.
Yeah. So was you were mentioning that this is a story that the junior kind of gets through his grief through creating some art with recycled material. Was there a moment of grief that inspired that part of the story?
For myself, you mean?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've lost people over the years. I've had that experience more than a handful of times, and it's always hard to get through it as an adult, and I think it's even harder to get through as a kid. Fortunately, I didn't have the experience of my father dying when I was young, but and I know people that did, and I've kind of had that experience secondhand many times in my life, just, knowing people that have gone through that experience when they were very young. Yeah. And so I felt like it was one of a few obstacles that Junior was presented with in this novel. And it is a coming of age story, but it's about getting through, right? And finding ways to manage grief and the other obstacles that are put in front of you, and having family and friends that help you get through it. So it felt like a real story to me in that way, even though there's magically real stuff going on.
Yeah. It's interesting. You and I are of a similar age. You remembered you're aware of the college that I went to that died many decades ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we both grew up in the Boston area, and Boston, especially decades ago, wasn't a place where people really talked about grief and support. It was kind of like suck it up, go to the funeral, go to the after party, and get on with life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
no, that's true. Yeah. It wasn't dealt with the same way that it is today, I think, and. You're right. It was just kind of like you got up the next day and you went about your business, and there isn't a lot of therapy in this book. There isn't a lot of like that type of thing. So there is that kind of notion that Junior just kind of stumbles into this magically real moment that sends him on these journeys without realizing that these journeys are designed, right, to help him. And So sometimes we have to just get out of our own way and listen to the things that are, the advice around us, or pick up on the signals that are around us. And then we find out after a while that we've gotten through it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It's interesting because it's true. I'm thankful now that kids have more outlets to talk through their grief. I'm thankful that adults have more outlets to be able to talk through their grief and understand it. But on the other hand, there is something to be said for, just kind of getting up and getting back to life and kind of dealing with our grief, learning about our grief through some of the ways that we bounce back and challenge ourselves and serve others.
Yeah, I used to say to my kids, I had 2 kids that went to art school, and I used to tell them how lucky they were, because no matter what was going on in the world, they had a way to go process it, right? Mm-hmm. They could deal with the art in a way that maybe consciously or unconsciously was helping them process whatever else was going on in their life. And I think there's some of that in this. Junior finds his way to using art and friendship as a way to heal. And, that felt like a real story to me. I mean, I do it with writing, it's, days can be good, days can be bad, but I know I can always sit down and write about it.
Yeah.
And that helps,
Absolutely. One of the things that we've encouraged families to encourage in their kids and encourage parents to do themselves is to write, whether it's trying to write a novel like Junior Miles and the Junkman, or just writing in a journal every day, just finding a place where you can take your feelings, good, bad, or indifferent, and put them down on paper. And that process, the physical process of putting them down on paper, I think gives us a little bit more time to process and think about things and look at things through a different lens, a lens that might help us understand what's going on a little bit better.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, I teach creative writing several days, several classes a semester, and I'm always trying to get kids to write honestly and, write about what's important to them. And I find that kids do get comfortable with just getting honest with it. And I think that's a great thing to carry with you through life, whether you want to write a novel or, like you say, whether you just want to keep a journal for yourself. Mm-hmm. I think it's a good practice for everybody.
Yeah. You mentioned teaching. You're the coordinator of creative writing at Salem State University here in Massachusetts. A great school. Have you noticed a difference in kids that are coming into your classroom these days as to compared to when you started teaching?
Well, I would say one thing that has changed is there's a lot more interest in kind of speculative fiction and fantasy than there used to be. And, markets change. Things get popular. This is what kids read, And so that's an interesting phenomenon. Sometimes I try and pull it back a little bit and try and get them to tell stories a little more grounded in reality. And because even in those fantasy novels, we have to experience human emotions, right? We have to feel like we can connect, even if they're creatures that are anatomically different than we are. There still has to be some humanness under the surface there that we can identify with. That's what readers love to do, right? Is, identify with the grief, the sadness, the happiness, all the things that go on in real life. So, I think my job as a creative writing instructor is to make sure that humanness exists, even in the universe that some of these students want to create.
Yeah. I'm always fascinated when authors come on and they've created these universes, and I always ask, I said, so as you're creating this universe and creating, the own laws of physics for this world that you're creating, do you need to write things down so you don't, get 5 chapters ahead and then, suddenly it's like, gravity only works this way and that?
Yeah, sometimes I need to be reminded of the rules, and I need need a glossary for everything that's going on. But yeah, and it's I do find at the core that that students will gravitate towards things they know and will eventually be comfortable writing honestly, whether that's disguised in a story about an alternate universe or whether it's grounded in today. I think that they're good at figuring out that in order for me to tell a story that people are going to react to, I need to make it as human as possible, no matter what the costumes look like, right? And no matter what the overarching fantasy is.
Do you think that desire to connect with the humanity of the characters we were reading about, is that what drives so many kids' storybooks about bears and dogs to, kind of put those human qualities into animals and butterflies and
yeah, I mean, the
trees
fable is so old, right? It's probably one of the oldest forms of storytelling, and it's but all those human lessons are coming out of the mouths of bears and reindeers and beavers and whatever animals you choose to put your story into. And it's so that fantasy is always there as a way to tell the story, but the real story being told is a human one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We love giving parents advice of how they can encourage their kids to explore either the STEM fields or their creativity. As the coordinator of creative writing, what advice would you give to parents that would help them encourage their kids? I remember at Bow State, I had an English teacher or whatever, and I remember going up to him saying, "Hey, can you take a look at a short story that I wrote?" And his response before he said yes, his response was, "Well, you're going to want me to tell you what I really think or what you want to hear?" And at that point I said, "Well, I don't want to talk to you at all."
Yeah. I think you grow a thick skin, over the years. I always tell my students, especially when we run a class that's in a workshop setting, is to take everyone's advice, say thank you, and then go home and do what you want. That not everything's going to resonate with you. You can't get your feelings hurt because it's a piece of writing, and the last thing you want is for people not to be honest with you, right? So, and it's very subjective business. What I like, you might not like, and vice versa, and we might both have good reasons for that. At least we think we have good reasons for it. So, the value of a workshop is just getting you to rethink the piece. It isn't like I have to go home and do exactly what A, B, or C said to me. I go home and I think about what they said, and somewhere in the gray area between that and what I started with maybe comes something new, right? Or maybe comes something better. So, I think it is off, it is a little nerve-wracking if you've never done it before, to have 15 people looking at you and saying stuff about what you wrote. But that's the game if you're going to get in it.
Yeah.
And you have to get used to it. And, I don't get my feelings hurt as much as I used to. And I find a way to look for constructive comments, even in the comments that might hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
So, that's what I try and pass on, that just be tough about it, and thank them all, and just go home and take what works and toss the rest out the window.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that's great advice we can share with our kids is, when you're asking for an opinion, it's try not to let it hurt your feelings. Understand that we're not making a value judgment about you. It's this thing, and we all have our perspectives, and like you said, something you like, I might not like, and we both have our reasons for that. But we take that in and encourage our kids to take it in, take these ideas in, and to think about them, and to have the freedom to kind of say, all right, that's what Kevin thinks. And he's a great coordinator of creative writing, and he's a great author, but I'm thinking a different way. And I can take what Kevin said and put it in a drawer over here.
Yeah. It's, sometimes it's a numbers game too, though, right? If you have 15 people looking at a piece and 8 of them are saying the same thing, then maybe you should go home and pay attention to that. They're not always wrong. Right. Mm-hmm. So, in some ways, I like to think that once you carve out a piece of writing and send it out to the world, in some ways, it's none of our business anymore. Mm-hmm. It belongs to the reader now. Right. And I'm not gonna, snoop around and stand over everybody's shoulder when they read it and correct them if they're thinking something different, right? It becomes their piece of art, and they can do what they want with it. And sometimes that agrees with you, and sometimes it doesn't. But it is kind of exposing yourself and putting yourself out there. It's taking a chance, both my kids were art school students, and they could tell you about critiques they had of their artwork. Mm-hmm. You have to kind of just push through that and not let it stop you from doing what you want to do.
Right. I think that's great advice, not only for writers, but great advice that parents can think about as they're encouraging their kids. Is there, now that Junior Miles and the Junkman is out there in the world, are we going to see more stories about Junior in the future?
I did a reading last night at a school, and I got asked that question. And I just related a story that I had when this book finally got picked up by Regal House and Fitzroy Books. I had a prologue and an interlude and an epilogue in the book, and the characters were all older. And Junior was now an artist, and he was getting ready for a gallery show in New York, and he was waiting for friends of his to come, and then we went, and he was standing by the Junkman figure, and a person came up, and he started a conversation with him, and then Junior recalls the story, kind of like Princess Bride or something, right? And so the publisher loved the book, they wanted it, but they wanted those parts removed. And I said, okay, they were only recently added anyway. Mm-hmm. And, but last night when I got asked that question, I was thinking if I were to continue this story, I think it would be when they were older. Mm-hmm. And maybe the Junkman appears again for some reason. I don't want to give anything away, but, so that would be the only way I'd do it. I don't think I would have a sequel that picks up in the same time.
Well, where can we go to find out more about you and find out more about Junior Miles and the Junkman?
Well, KevinCareyWriter.com has it all. And Regal House and Fitzroy Books also links to things that are going on and articles about the novel and, the journey that it's taken to get there. This novel had 3 agents, and they all loved it, and none of them could sell it. And I used to get these wonderful rejections from some pretty amazing publishing houses, and I used to think, well, if you like it that much, buy it, Mm-hmm. And so it had its own journey until it finally found a home. And so what I've been telling kids is, look, if you believe in something, sometimes you have to hang in there.
Right.
That there are authors that strike gold overnight, but it's not the typical writer's story.
Right.
And everything I've written, the books I've published, have all taken me a long time.
Right.
So if you're serious about this and you want to get into it, be willing to hang in there. And while one thing's not successful, you go to another thing, and you just keep all these fires alive. And if you're lucky, as I've been lately, they start to pop for you. So it's a lesson in perseverance, I think, above all else.
Absolutely. And it sounds like going to a great school like Salem State University, which is affordable and has great teachers like you, it would be a good experience because you don't graduate with $1 bazillion in debt. And you also get some practical advice about writing and about the fact that writing is a business. And it takes some thick skin and takes a lot of grit and resiliency.
Yeah, and, we can help you get there.
Yeah. Well, we've had a great time speaking to the author of Junior Miles and the Junkman, a great middle grade novel from our guest, Kevin Carey. Hey, Kevin, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Jed. I appreciate it.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast, and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. We are so grateful that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. We'd love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/Reading with Your Kids, at Reading with Your Kids on Instagram, at Jedley Magic on Twitter. If you are on LinkedIn, please connect with Jed Doherty. We also have a Reading with Your Kids page on LinkedIn. We would love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Authors, click on the Authors Click Here button to find out how you can be a guest here in the show and find out how we can help you celebrate your book with the world. And also, parents, please be sure to visit readingwithyourkids.com to download our free online magazine. Hey, we want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our amazing guest. I also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Chris Doherty, Ann O'Leary, Soji Franklin. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.
What?